I discovered a secret room behind my bedroom wall that contained evidence my house was built on a murder site. I was 19 when I moved back into my childhood bedroom after college. Mom had converted it into a home office while I was away, but when I graduated without a job lined up, she grudgingly moved her desk back to the living room. "It's temporary," I told her, stacking boxes of my college stuff in the corner. "Just until I find something." She rolled her eyes. "That's what your brother said. He lived here until he was 26. The room felt smaller than I remembered. The walls seemed closer together, especially the one behind my bed. I'd always thought it was weird how my room was narrower than my brother's, even though they should have been the same size. When I was little, I used to press my ear against that wall, convinced I could hear something moving behind it. Mom always said it was just the house settling. After a week of job hunting, I was lying in bed scrolling through rejection emails when I heard it. A hollow echo when I accidentally kicked the wall. I pressed my ear against it and knocked. Definitely hollow. The wall was thinner than it should be. That night, I waited until my parents were asleep and started examining the wall more carefully. The paint looked newer in one section, and when I ran my fingers along the edges, I found what felt like a seam. Using a flashlight, I could see where someone had carefully patched and repainted a rectangular section. The work was professional, but if you knew what to look for, the lines were visible. I grabbed a utility knife from Dad's toolbox and carefully scored along the seam. The drywall came away in a clean rectangle, revealing a dark space behind it. The smell hit me immediately. Musty, old, with something else underneath that made my stomach turn. It reminded me of the basement after heavy rains, but worse, sweet and rotten. I shined my phone's flashlight into the opening. It was a room, maybe 6 feet wide and 4 feet deep, just tall enough for someone my height to crouch inside. The walls were the original wood paneling from when the house was built in the 1960s. Cobwebs hung like curtains in the corners. But that wasn't the strangest part. Scattered across the floor were dozens of old photographs, newspaper clippings, and what looked like police reports. I crawled inside and started gathering them up. My hands were shaking as I read the headlines. "Local woman vanishes without a trace. Search continues for missing mother of 2. Police suspect foul play in disappearance." All the articles were about the same woman, Delilah Reeves. She'd gone missing in 1987, just 3 years before my parents bought this house. The photos showed a woman in her 30s with dark hair and kind eyes. In several pictures, she was standing in front of a house that looked exactly like ours. Same porch, same mailbox, same oak tree in the front yard. But it was the police report that made my blood run cold. The last known address for Delilah Reeves was our house number on our street. She had lived here, in this house, maybe even in this very room. I spent the rest of the night going through everything. There were dozens of newspaper clippings spanning several months, each one chronicling the investigation into Delilah's disappearance. The police had searched everywhere: the nearby woods, the lake, abandoned buildings. They'd interviewed neighbors, family members, co-workers, but they'd never found a body. According to the articles, Delilah had been going through a nasty divorce. Her husband claimed she'd run off with another man, but her family insisted she would never abandon her 2 young children. The last person to see her alive was a neighbor who said she'd been working in her garden around 6 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in September. That's when I found the photographs that made me sick. Hidden underneath the newspaper clippings were Polaroids, dozens of them. They showed Delilah, but these weren't family photos. They were surveillance shots. Someone had been watching her, photographing her through windows, following her to the grocery store, capturing her hanging laundry in the backyard. In the final photos, she looked terrified. The last one showed her tied to a chair in what looked like a basement, her mouth covered with duct tape, her eyes wide with fear. At the bottom of the pile, I found a handwritten journal. The entries were dated from August through September 1987. My hands shook as I read the first page. "She doesn't know I'm watching yet, but she will. They always figure it out eventually. The others tried to run, but there's nowhere to go in this house. The basement is perfect. Soundproof." I dropped the journal like it was on fire. This wasn't just evidence of a murder. It was evidence of multiple murders. The person who wrote this had killed before. I kept reading, even though every instinct told me to stop. The entries detailed weeks of stalking Delilah, learning her routine, planning what the writer called the collection. The final entry was dated September 18th, 1987, the day she disappeared. "It's done. Dee is with the others now. The foundation work starts tomorrow. No one will ever find them. Foundation work." I thought about the concrete floor in our basement, the one Dad always said was unusually thick for a house built in the 1960s. That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway. I quickly shoved everything back into the hidden room and slid the drywall panel back into place. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure whoever was out there could hear it. The footsteps stopped outside my door. "Honey?" It was Mom's voice. "Are you okay?" "I heard noises." "I'm fine," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just couldn't sleep." "Okay, try to get some rest." I waited until I heard her bedroom door close, then grabbed my laptop and started researching. What I found made everything worse. Our house had been sold by the estate of a man named Vernon Blackwood in early 1990. Vernon had died of a heart attack in 1989, alone in the house. According to the real estate listing, the property had needed extensive renovations before it could be sold, including major foundation work in the basement. I found Vernon's obituary. He'd been a 54-year-old construction worker who'd lived alone after his wife left him in 1985. No children, no close relatives. The obituary mentioned his longtime hobby of photography. I spent the rest of the night digging deeper. There was no police record connecting Vernon to Delilah's disappearance. He'd never been a suspect, never been questioned. But as I searched through old missing persons cases, a pattern emerged. Between 1985 and 1989, 5 women had vanished from our town and the surrounding areas, all between the ages of 25 and 35, all going through divorces or living alone, all last seen in the evening hours near their homes. Delilah Reeves was just the last one. When morning came, I made a decision. I had to tell someone. But who? If I went to the police, they'd want to search the house. That would destroy my parents, who had no idea they'd been living above a crime scene for over 30 years. But if I didn't tell someone, those families would never know what happened to their loved ones. I decided to start with the basement. While my parents were at work, I went downstairs and really examined the concrete floor for the first time. Most of it looked normal, but there was a section under the stairs that seemed different. The concrete was a slightly different color, and when I tapped it with a hammer, it sounded hollow in some spots. That's when I found the loose floorboard upstairs. I was measuring the dimensions of the basement against the main floor when I realized the space didn't match up. There was about a 6-foot section that should have been part of the basement but wasn't accessible. The entrance had to be somewhere on the main floor. I found it in the hall closet, a floorboard that was just slightly raised compared to the others. When I pried it up, there was a metal ladder leading down into darkness. The smell that came up was overwhelming, sweet and sickly, like flowers left too long in water. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed down. The hidden basement was exactly what I'd expected, and worse than I'd feared. 5 wooden boxes lined one wall, each marked with initials and dates. DR 9/1887 was the last one. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. But that's not what made me run back upstairs, gasping and sick. It was the 6th box, the one that was newer and smaller than the others, the one labeled with initials that made my blood freeze, my initials, and tomorrow's date. I raced back to my room and grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, but before I could dial, I heard the front door open. "Honey, I'm home early," Dad called out, feeling a bit under the weather. His voice was different somehow, flatter, like he was reading from a script. I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs, slow and deliberate, too slow for someone who was sick. That's when I noticed my bedroom wall. The drywall panel I'd carefully put back in place was gone. The hidden room was open, and it was empty. Someone had moved everything. The footsteps stopped outside my door. "I know you found it," Dad said through the door. His voice was still flat, emotionless. "We need to talk." I looked at my phone. No signal. He'd blocked it somehow. The doorknob started to turn. That's when everything clicked into place. Dad had been 28 when Vernon Blackwood died, the same age Vernon was when the murders started. The construction work, the foundation, the renovation of the house before my parents bought it. Dad hadn't just worked on this house. He'd finished what Vernon started, and now he knew I knew. The door opened slowly. Dad stood in the doorway, but he looked different. His usual warm smile was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You shouldn't have gone looking," he said quietly. "Your mother and I have been so happy here, and you and your brother turned out so well. I'd hoped you'd never have to know." "Dad," I started, but he held up a hand. "Don't call me that. Not now. Now I'm just Vernon's successor." He stepped into the room. He taught me everything through his journals. Did you know he left detailed instructions? Like a manual for how to keep the tradition alive. My blood turned to ice. What tradition? Taking care of women who need guidance. Women who are lost, alone, making poor choices. He sat down on my bed like we were having a normal conversation. "Your mother was supposed to be first, you know, back when she was divorcing your stepfather. But she was so perfect, so grateful for my help, that I decided to keep her instead." "Mom doesn't know," I whispered. "Of course not. Why would I burden her with details? She's happy. You were happy. Your brother was happy. I only take the ones who won't be missed, the ones whose families have given up hope." I backed toward the window. "The 6th box was for emergencies," he said calmly. "I'd hoped I'd never need it, but you're too much like your real father. Too curious, too stubborn." "My real father?" Dad's laugh was hollow. "Did you think it was coincidence that I met your mother right after her divorce? Right when she was vulnerable and alone? I've been watching families break apart for decades, waiting for the perfect ones to save." The window was locked. I fumbled with the latch while keeping my eyes on him. "Your biological father was asking too many questions about Vernon's disappearance. Thought there was some connection between the missing women and the construction work being done around town. So I introduced myself to your mother at the grocery store, offered to help with some repairs around her apartment. You killed him. I saved your mother from a man who would have dragged her into a dangerous investigation, and I saved you from growing up without a father figure." He stood up slowly. "But I can see you don't appreciate the sacrifice." I got the window open and screamed as loud as I could. "Help! Someone help me!" Dad moved faster than I expected. His hand clamped over my mouth, cutting off my scream. "No one's going to hear you," he said softly. "I made sure of that years ago. The neighbors on both sides are too old to hear much of anything, and your mother won't be home for hours." He dragged me away from the window. I bit his hand and managed to break free, running for the door. But he caught me on the stairs, his arms wrapping around me from behind. "This doesn't have to be painful," he whispered in my ear. "Vernon was sloppy with the first few. I've learned to be more efficient." That's when I remembered the utility knife still in my pocket. I pulled it out and slashed backward, catching him across the forearm. He let go with a grunt of pain, and I bolted for the front door. Locked. Deadbolted from the inside with a key. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife I could find. Dad appeared in the doorway, blood dripping from his arm, his face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful little bitch," he snarled. "After everything I've done for this family?" "You're insane," I said, holding the knife in front of me. "You're a serial killer. I'm a provider, a protector. Do you have any idea how hard it's been to maintain this life? To keep your mother happy while managing the collection?" He pulled a roll of duct tape from his pocket. Vernon had the right idea, but he was selfish. He didn't share his gifts with the family. Those women had families too. Broken families, failed families. I saved their children from growing up with damaged mothers. He started circling toward me, just like I saved you. I lunged with the knife, but he was ready. He grabbed my wrist and twisted until I dropped it. The duct tape came out, and before I could scream, he had a strip across my mouth. My hands were taped behind my back in seconds. Dad had done this before, many times. He carried me to the basement. Not the hidden one, but the regular one where I'd played as a child, where he taught me to throw a baseball, where we'd built a treehouse model together when I was 8. "I need to call your mother," he said, setting me in a chair and taping my legs to it. "Tell her you decided to take that job in California after all, that you left suddenly and won't be able to visit for a while." He pulled out his phone and dialed. I struggled against the tape, but it was too tight. "Hi, honey," he said in his normal, loving voice. "Yeah, I came home early. No, I'm feeling better. Listen, you're not going to believe this, but our daughter got a call about that marketing job in San Francisco. They want her to start immediately. I know I'm sad too, but it's such a great opportunity. She's already packing." I screamed against the tape, but only muffled sounds came out. "What? Oh, that's just the TV. I'm watching a movie. Yes, I'll miss her too. Love you. See you tonight." He hung up and looked at me with what almost seemed like genuine sadness. "I really am sorry it came to this. You were supposed to be my legacy, my proof that I could build something better than Vernon ever did." He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a small bottle and a syringe. "But some people are just too broken to save." As he filled the syringe, I managed to work one hand partially free. The tape was looser than he'd realized. While he had his back turned, I slipped my hand out and quietly peeled the tape from my mouth. "What did you give the others?" I asked. He turned around, surprised to hear my voice. "Just something to help them sleep. Vernon used more primitive methods. I prefer to be humane." "How many were there, really? More than 5? Dad smiled sadly. 23, including Vernon's 5. Over 35 years of careful work. His voice carried an odd note of pride. "I've probably prevented dozens of broken homes, hundreds of damaged children. You're rationalizing murder." "I'm explaining necessity," he approached with the syringe. "The women I choose are already lost, already making destructive choices. I simply redirect their path toward something meaningful." "Meaningful?" "They become part of something larger, part of a family that functions, that thrives." He grabbed my arm. "Your mother never knew poverty again after I came into her life. You and your brother never went hungry, never lacked for anything. Those women contributed to that." I jerked my arm away. "Their children grew up without mothers. Their children grew up in foster care or with relatives who could provide stability. Better than being raised by women who were clearly incapable of maintaining healthy relationships." The twisted logic was terrifying. He genuinely believed he was helping. "What about Delilah Reeves? She was a good mother." "Delilah was about to lose custody to her ex-husband because of her drinking problem. I saved her children from witnessing their mother's inevitable decline." "You don't get to make that choice." "Someone has to," he said simply. "Someone has to be strong enough to do what's necessary." He lunged forward with the syringe, but I had my other hand free now. I grabbed the small table lamp beside my chair and swung it at his head. The ceramic base shattered against his temple, and he staggered backward. I ripped the tape from my legs and ran for the stairs, but my legs were numb from being bound. I stumbled and fell, giving him time to recover. "You're just like your biological father," he called after me. "Too stubborn to accept help." I crawled up the stairs as fast as I could, but he caught my ankle just as I reached the top. I kicked backward with my other foot, catching him in the face. He let go with a curse, and I scrambled into the kitchen. The keys to his truck were on the counter. I grabbed them and ran for the garage, but Dad was right behind me. As I fumbled with the truck door, he tackled me to the concrete floor. "This ends now," he panted, blood streaming from his nose. But I'd managed to hit the panic button on his key fob. The truck's alarm was blaring, loud enough to wake the dead. "Shut that off," he demanded, but I'd thrown the keys under the truck. Within minutes, I heard sirens. Someone had called the police about the noise. Dad heard them too, and his face went white. "You've destroyed everything," he whispered. 35 years of careful work. A perfect family. "It was never perfect," I said. "It was built on murder." The police knocked on the front door. Dad looked at me for a long moment, then walked into the house. I heard the door open, heard him talking to the officers in his normal, friendly voice. "Sorry about the noise, officers. My daughter was having trouble with her car alarm. We've got it sorted now." I crawled out from under the truck and ran toward the voices. "Help me!" I screamed. "He's a killer! There are bodies in the basement!" The conversation at the front door stopped. I stumbled around the corner to find 2 officers staring at me, covered in blood, tape still stuck to my wrists, clearly in distress. "Ma'am, are you injured?" one of them asked. "He killed them," I sobbed. 23 women. They're buried under the house." Dad stood in the doorway, his face a mask of concern and confusion. "Officers, my daughter has been struggling with some mental health issues since college. She's been having episodes—" "He's lying!" I screamed. "Check the basement. There's a hidden room." The officers looked between us. Dad, calm and reasonable in his work clothes. Me, hysterical and bloody. "Sir, we're going to need to take a look around," one of them said. "Of course," Dad replied. "Though I should warn you, she's been fixated on this fantasy for weeks. We've been trying to get her help." As we walked toward the basement, I prayed they would believe me. Everything depended on what we found down there. The regular basement looked normal. Clean concrete floors, furnace, water heater, storage shelves. Dad gestured around calmly. As you can see, nothing unusual here. But I knew about the hidden entrance. I ran to the hall closet and showed them the loose floorboard. When they pried it up, the smell hit everyone immediately. One officer radioed for backup while the other climbed down with a flashlight. When he came back up, his face was pale. "We're going to need the coroner," he said quietly into his radio. "And crime scene techs. Multiple victims." Dad's mask finally slipped. For just a moment, I saw something cold and predatory flash across his face before he composed himself again. "I have no idea how those got there," he said. "This is the first I'm hearing of any of this." But when they searched my room and found the hidden space, empty now but clearly recently used, his story fell apart. They found his fingerprints on the newspaper clippings. They found the journal hidden in his workshop with handwriting samples that matched. Most damning of all, they found the 6th box, the one with my initials, fresh, ready. As they led him away in handcuffs, Dad looked back at me one last time. "You have no idea what you've done to this," he said quietly. "Your mother will." He was right about that part. Mom came home to find our house surrounded by police cars, and when I tried to explain, she wouldn't process. "There has to be some mistake," she kept saying. "Your father would never. He's a good man. He saved us." Even when they showed her the evidence, even when DNA tests confirmed the identities of the victims, she refused to believe it. In her mind, I had somehow manufactured the entire thing to destroy her happiness. "He gave us a beautiful life," she told me the night before his trial began. "And you threw it all away because you couldn't handle being back home." She moved out the next week, renting a small apartment across town. She visits Dad in prison every Tuesday and Thursday. She still wears her wedding ring. My brother cut off contact completely. He claimed the scandal had cost him his job, his fiancée, his future. "We had a good thing," he said during our last phone call. "Why couldn't you just leave it alone?" The trial lasted 6 months. Dad's defense team tried to paint me as an unstable young adult seeking attention, but the physical evidence was overwhelming. They found remains of 23 women, spanning nearly 4 decades, some of Vernon's original victims, some from Dad's early years, and some from as recently as 3 years ago. The families of the victims packed the courtroom every day. I met Delilah Reeves's children, now adults with children of their own. They thanked me for finally giving them answers, but I could see the pain in their eyes. 37 years of wondering what happened to their mother. Dad was sentenced to life without parole. As they led him away, he looked directly at me and mouthed the words, "You destroyed everything." Maybe I did, but I also saved the woman who would have been victim number 24, and 25, and however many more he would have taken over the years. The house was demolished 6 months after the trial. No one wanted to buy it, and the city declared it a health hazard. I was there the day they tore it down, watching 37 years of secrets finally come to light. Now I live in a small apartment 3 states away. I changed my name, started over completely. I work at a crisis center helping women escape dangerous situations. It seems fitting somehow. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never kicked that wall. If I'd just gotten a job and moved out without discovering the truth. Would Dad have eventually stopped? Would those women still be alive in some parallel universe where I minded my own business? But then I remembered the 6th box, the one with my initials. And I know that eventually, I would have asked too many questions or noticed too many inconsistencies. Eventually, I would have become a problem that needed to be solved. The hardest part isn't the nightmares or the therapy or the way people look at me when they recognize my name from the news coverage. The hardest part is knowing that the man who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped with my homework and came to every school play, was capable of taking 23 lives without showing an ounce of remorse. The hardest part is understanding that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a father making pancakes on Sunday morning, asking about your day, promising to always protect you. Sometimes it lives in your house for 30 years, building a family on a foundation of bones.